Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where it is and wherever it is and whenever it is you are. I am Kristi. I'm sorry, I'm trying to run several screens here and do transitions between different ones, so thank you for your patience. Hi, welcome back to Why Patriarchy Ruins Everything. And I hope, like I said, you're having a good day today. Instead of doing some of the more academic-y things that we've been focused on in the past, I am going to instead do a little response video because it's important to me in the course of this show to demonstrate the ways in which, like this is relevant to current affairs and what people are talking about today. So that is what we're going to do. Also, I want to thank Flint Reed in the chat for pointing out, apparently there's a typo in my thumbnail and I take that on. I need to update that and correct it. So thank you for pointing that out because I missed it. My thumbnail is about this size in my YouTube window. And so I will be correcting that shortly. Before we go too far on with what we're doing today, the video response, I just want to cover some ground for anybody who is new and hasn't had a chance to watch the previous two videos. Also, I'll say I'm not going to look at the chat during the main show, but I will at the end. And if you have questions or comments, I will go through those before we wrap up. So, let's talk about how patriarchy ruins everything by first reviewing the ways in which patriarchy has, I think, been misunderstood in the past and how reconceptualizing it with a more updated understanding can really transform our concept of patriarchy and make it far more useful as an analytic concept when looking at society and how certain attitudes, values, and beliefs hang together. So I think I could do this and swap over. Yay! Okay, all right. If you remember, my main critique of the traditional definition of patriarchy is that it has been focused far too much on a false gender binary. So I'm going to switch back. I gave you that little. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But my main critique is that historically and until very recently, I can't think of anyone who's done this besides me. But also I need to read a lot more. So put a pin in that. But patriarchy was distilled down to a very core idea of men controlling women. The problem with this concept is that within this framework, it doesn't make a lot of sense for men to oppose patriarchy or to be harmed by patriarchy. Likewise, within this framework, there's no obvious reason for women to uphold or defend or reproduce patriarchy. And yet we know that there are men who criticize forms of patriarchy, the various attitudes, values, and beliefs that underpin it, norms for masculinity, which are quite emotionally harmful and toxic. And there are women who buy into patriarchy and who uphold it and indoctrinate their children into it. So how do we better understand this empirical reality given the limited conceptual definition that existed up until this time? And my argument would be that we have to correctly define patriarchy. Patriarchy is actually closer, I'll write out a definition someday, but we're working on it. The core of it is that patriarchy is really an attempt by a small group to control the the gender roles, the gender identities, and sexual orientations within an entire population in order to privilege that one particular group. And that one particular group in the West has been heterosexual cis men. Now, this concept doesn't transfer identically. Like, we have cultures where there are third genders, but still patriarchy. So we see that this is culturally conditional, but the underlying attempt to control who can and can't have sex and in what conditions, or under what conditions and circumstances, is what I think at the heart of patriarchy. And that control also revolves around controlling sexual orientation, controlling gender roles, and controlling gender identity. Because if you start to unpack that core of those patriarchal beliefs, the whole system starts to unravel as being anti-egalitarian, anti-personal freedom, anti-human rights, and all the other flaws of it. So let me now go back to my other screen and just review my working model. Again, this is, just working, but my perspective is patriarchy begins with either physical violence or the threat of physical violence or sexual violence in order to keep a population in fear, whether that is the gay community or the trans community or women. This sort of particularly violence based on your identity, your sexual orientation, your gender presentation, in order to force you to conform, is very much part of what is used to impose patriarchal norms on an entire society. And these norms include a lot of really false beliefs, such as biological essentialism, chauvinisms. It's a preference for hierarchy against egalitarianism. It's a preference for sort of like, keeping power within a group of potentially incompetent elites rather than meritocracy. It's upheld in Western societies traditionally by homophobia and transphobia. It is grounded in the ideas of male privilege, of misogyny and misandry, as well as sexism. And then these values permeate the public sphere in the form of religion is a huge cultural contribution, cultural norms, and then it's instituted from a more informal way to a formal way by laws and also economic structures, so that wealth and power at every level of society is controlled by, or has been traditionally controlled by this particular group of men. This is also reinforced in the home, where notions about men being the king of his castle and women wanting to have babies all the time and being really happy to do housework is also part of this culture that reinforces the public sphere norms. And all of this weight, when you're born into the world, you're born into this culture. You're born into a lot of social expectations of what it means to be a man or be a woman. Not to say that there aren't counter conversations, counter discourses, but it's an uphill, it's an uphill battle to get people to relocate their values in individual freedom and egalitarianism rather than in defending this unjustified hierarchy. Okay, are we all caught up? Okay, I wanted to give one example before we moved on to the video of what I see as this nexus of gender roles, gender identity, sexual orientation, and how patriarchy can work against both men and women and harm men and women and non-binary people and trans people by looking at an example from the Bible. This is one of my go-to examples because it's when you realize what has sort of gone on in the Bible and I explain it to you, you can't unsee it. So if we think about, I'm just going to say SA in the, who cares about monetization? Let's be clear. Sexual assault in the Bible. The male authors of the Bible who held a false gender binary, who viewed women as property, girls and women as property, men's property, to be exchanged. And that exchange is regulated by men. One of the ways you can think about sexual assault as a violation of a person, but really in terms of the biblical framing, it is framed in terms of property damage. And it is also framed in such a way that victim equals woman or girl. The only types of sexual assault dealt with in the Bible, it is assumed that a man would commit sexual violence against a girl or a woman. And then there's a whole discussion about victim blaming. Did she cry out in the city? And then also negotiating damages to her father, right? Or the violation of a husband's property. And in which case, I think he gets killed or something. Now, this equation of victim with being a woman or being a girl means implicitly that the category of boys or men being victims of sexual assault just doesn't exist. And then you combine this with homophobia, where the crime for a man lying with a man as he does with a woman is death. The unintended consequence, I believe, is to basically create a breeding ground of sexual predators, of men who want to prey on boys and other men. Because those victims don't exist as victims, even as a concept. And if they do come forward, they are basically condemning themselves to death. So this becomes then a sort of like rape culture where, and I think we looked at the numbers, we could all agree that the vast majority of sexual predators are men. And so you're basically creating the perfect conditions for young boys and men to be victims of sexual assault with no recourse and no way to protect themselves. This is how patriarchy can hurt both men and women, by treating, in this case, women and girls as property rather than looking at their own dignity and treating these cases in terms of the harm done to the victim, not to the owner of the property. And also by ignoring an entire category of victims because this makes your homophobia feel uncomfortable, and to acknowledge the humanity of a victim of homosexual violence, sexual violence, would somehow, I don't know, like blow their little minds. And so I think this is why my working concept here is far more useful and precise when it comes to these ideas. Now, we're going to look at a video. If those of you who watch the happy hour, we covered this video, well, about half of it because it's kind of long, on the happy hour 2 episodes or so ago. And it's done by What If Alt History. The entire video kind of suffers generally from a lack of serious engagements in the topics that are brought up. There's a lot of unsupported assertions. There are a lot of opinions presented as facts. And then there are a lot of claims about the world and how it exists that just don't really map onto any form of reality. But I wanted to take a look at it here today as an example of kind of like the way that patriarchal thinking reduces your critical thinking skills. And instead, because it relies so much on biases and stereotypes rather than truths and facts, it just ends up not being able to defend itself very well at all. So this video clip we're going to watch, and it's only like a few seconds. It comes from the coming far right backlash from What If Alt History. And yeah, I guess that's about all I really need to say. I'll just kind of like run the clip, and then we'll talk about it in terms of its reasoning, and then we'll follow up and talk again about it in terms of its empirical validity. So this is part of there's a transition period here. It's not a clean cut, so we're just going to kind of jump in a bit as he's moving between topics. Now, let me make sure y'all can hear that. Desktop audio is still muted. Okay, let me turn that back on. So many things to turn on and off. Here we go.
Due to centuries of oppression. For women, they're absolutely wonderful as individuals and a big reason to keep living as a man. And
all right, I'm going to play it through and then we're going to go back.
They also form the bedrock of society. However, women have absolutely no track record for forming large groups. All of society's major institutions, whether militaries, governments, religions, corporations, have been founded across world history and almost entirely staffed by men. Even nunneries and brothels, entirely female organizations, are run by men. If this was a cultural thing, not a biological, it would fluctuate around world history, but it doesn't. Due to never having to evolve to hunt as a group, women do not have the same instinct towards cooperation that men do. Most really pretty girls have been horribly bullied in high school, and most of their friends are guys, since women tear down successful or beautiful women, since their sexual competition is largely zero-sum, while men are
Oh, you're just watching me. How boring. I'm so sorry. I thought I changed the screen. My apologies all. We'll go back. Okay, you kind of got the core of it. I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, okay. I'm gonna create a little window of myself in the other window from now on so that you can watch some more interesting things. Okay, so let's break this down now that you listen to it while I listen to it. And this time you can watch the still pictures. Honestly, it wasn't that much different, but it is more interesting to look at. So to be fair, the video is more interesting to look at. Let's take this again.
Due to centuries of oppression. For women, they're absolutely wonderful as individuals and a big reason to keep living as a man.
Okay, so as you know before, because you've listened to, now I get to switch back, because you listened to it before, you know that he'll later say that women are evil and tear each other down. So there's a contradiction already within like 2 minutes. So women are both wonderful individuals, and women as a group are really catty and they tear down other women and are horrible. Okay, then there are big reason to keep living as a man. I guess if I were going to talk about women as a group, I probably wouldn't define their worth by the extent to which they give men a reason to live, as if they don't have their own justifications for their own existence. So again, even this apparent compliment is really based in men's approval. It's to what degree are you useful to me, not are you a valuable person in and of yourself. And there's also this kind of so we say pedestal, putting like stereotyping again all women as being wonderful, kind of reduces them again to objects and not seeing their complexity and their diversity as a group. So again, just kind of uncomfortable things as that are supposed to be compliments.
And they also form the bedrock of society.
All right. Okay. Women forming the bedrock of society. But also women can't organize anything. So women are useless in society. Another apparent contradiction. I think what he means here is that women have babies and do a lot of free labor, do a lot of unpaid labor in the form of child rearing, in household care, and also in caring for elderly parents. And those roles are very important to society. And actually, they're so important and valuable to society, in many ways more important than, let's say, SpaceX will ever be. And yet they have very little respect. Women are expected to perform years' worth of unpaid labor over the course of their lifetimes without compensation. So if something is the bedrock of society and it's incredibly valuable, why don't we treat it like it's valuable? Why don't we have incredibly generous parental leave? Why don't we have incredibly generous, like support for people who care for their parents as they age rather than taking up resources provided by the state, in facilities, in nursing facilities? This is this contradiction in the importance of women and yet also dismissing their abilities in society, and it seems a little self-contradictory. Okay.
However, women have absolutely no track record for forming large groups.
I don't like what? What is a large group? I don't know, like the movement for suffrage, something like that, or women's participation in another. Let's say you would just specify like feminist work, like things like Planned Parenthood, or other things where there are a lot of like women-led organizations. Again, this is an assertion. It's not really empirically grounded. Also, the formation of large groups is different from the administration of, say, an existing government. When was the last time, like, a country formed a military? So many of these institutions have been historically established. I mean, probably if you want to look more closely, you'd have to look at maybe like the 1960s, near the end of colonialism, in some newly formed and recognized independent states. But all of this seems, I don't know, it seems kind of irrelevant to whether or not women are capable of being executives and being in charge and running things now. So having no track record in forming large groups, and two, we'll get onto the empirics in a second. So
all of society's major institutions, whether militaries, government,
I need to change the screen again.
also form the bedrock of society. However, women have absolutely no track record for forming large groups. All of society's major institutions, whether militaries, governments, religions, corporations, have been founded across world history and almost entirely staffed by men.
All right. I will say that that is empirically the case, but it's empirically the case because men prevented women from, largely, prevented women from entering those spheres. If you actually look back to early Christianity, one of Paul's apostles that he names in his letter is Juliana or something like that. A woman apostle, women who organized the housing and location for the makeshift churches in early Christian history, before it became powerful. Right? We did see women helping to organize and lead the early Christian movement, and Paul relying upon them. So again, here's the thing. Like, if you exclude a group from entering and competing in a sphere, you then don't get to point to that exclusion as a justification for continued exclusion. Let's take an example from America, right? When baseball was desegregated in the 1940s, I believe. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure that's the time period we're talking about. Imagine what if alt history made this argument? Look, black baseball players have no track record in winning a World Series. Therefore, we should not allow them to play because they're just never going to be in any winning World Series games. What? If you really just take that argument out of this particular thing, where it's assumed, yeah, women have no track record, they're incompetent, and so we should continue to exclude them, and apply it to anything else, and the logic is equally as flawed. And so this is kind of like the thing that patriarchy, these norms about the feminine being less, women being irrational, all of this stuff, by assuming these things, it's a way to exclude competition for a group of men who have historically had privileges they did not deserve, allowing incompetence to go unpunished or unregulated or, unchecked through meritocracy. And the other thing, too, is, if you want to make this argument that women shouldn't run things because they don't have a track record, let's look at men's track record. That gets left out of this analysis. Because there is some good, but there's a lot of bad too. And in my opinion, if the guys have had 10,000 years of being in charge and we've seen what they can do, well, let's shift it up a little bit and see what would the world look like if women were in charge of things or ran things. Because honestly, if you look back in history, it's not like men have been brilliant leaders because they've been men. Been a lot of incompetent leaders. So that's the reasoning part of it. Let's just finish off this segment. I think he gets into here how women are terrible and catty even though they're wonderful. So we'll just watch that, and then I'll make an empirical argument, and then we'll go to questions and wrap it up.
Even nunneries and brothels, entirely female organizations, are run by men.
Can I just pause that? There are often times like priests who would come and administer the sacrament because, again, of sexism and misandry and misogyny in this particular case in the church. But this idea that women didn't run the abbeys in any meaningful way is just, again, empirically not sustainable if you look back at history. And brothels, we're going to talk about, generally brothels have been men, again, using their economic and legal status to exploit women's unpaid labor. It's just a different form of it here. And so again, saying because women were not allowed to run brothels legally, they aren't legal persons in terms of money and all that kind of stuff, that shows that they can't organize. It's dumb. Also, you need to study, is it the history of Utah, which had that really, really famous madam, and how Utah became the first state to provide women the vote because she was so powerful and worked her way up and stuff. So again, these are sexist stereotypes, not based in reality. They were, yeah. So there's some good historical videos on her. I can't remember the name at the top of my, it's not the tip of my tongue. All right, let's see if we can wrap this up.
If this was a cultural thing, not a biological...
Oh, okay. If this was a cultural thing and not a biological... What? Okay, oh yeah, that's right. He's going to make this argument that somehow women don't cooperate because they don't go out and hunt large beasts. As if okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll let it run.
it would fluctuate around world history, but it
By the way, it does in terms of like women's leadership around the world in history, but we'll get to that.
doesn't. Due to never having to evolve to hunt as a group, women do not have the same instinct towards cooperation that
Okay. All right. This idea that women don't have an instinct toward cooperation because they don't hunt big furry things. I don't, I kind of doubt this young man has engaged in any kind of childcare in a meaningful way in his entire life. Because one of the things that I think characterizes the modern period is the fact that couples now move out of their parents' home and you have single generation households, whereas traditionally you had multi-generational households, or at least multi-generational neighborhoods. Childcare is a cooperative endeavor. Gathering food and preparing food is a cooperative endeavor. Women have been cooperating for a very long time in, helping with child rearing, child bearing, all these types of things. And so again, this chauvinism of only valuing hunting, big game, which was just a fraction of the diet of our ancestors. Most of it was, more plant-based and probably fish. Women can fish, girls can fish, pretty much anyone can fish. And it just demonstrates, again, this idea that what is masculine is inherently better and what is feminine is inherently less, of less value. Also, again, just blows my mind that he completely omits the role of child cooperation and child rearing within families and across generations. I'm just mind blown.
men do. Most really pretty girls have been horribly bullied in high school, and
I don't know where he's getting these information from. Pretty girls have been bullied and their friends are guys. It just doesn't map. I think it's just like more grabbing for things in his experience, limited experience, rather than looking at external data. Because I don't even know a study that you could put these two things together. Please point me toward one if you can find it.
most of their friends are guys. Since women tear down successful or beautiful women, since their sexual competition is largely zero sum, while men are sexually rewarded by being what amounts to successful hunters.
Men are rewarded for being what I don't. This evolution, this sort of biological essentialism, doesn't take into effect like a whole lot of things in reality. Men don't hunt anymore. Women are increasingly becoming economically dependent, and they're not dating anybody because they can pay for their own apartment and their own car and their own food. Do women have more ability to select now because they're not economically dependent on marriage? Or to trade in their sexual favors and domestic skills for security? Yeah, that's the case. But you know what? I think that's good. I don't think you should marry someone because otherwise you're going to be destitute without an ability to get a job. I don't think that it's showing dignity and respect to a person to think that you're basically having to barter with your body and your labor in order to have physical and food security and to be able to have a house to live in. I don't really understand this praise of this caveman mentality. All right, I think I'm going to try to wrap it up here pretty soon, so we'll just let it run a little bit and see, because I think he moves on to his next point pretty quickly.
And bringing stuff for the whole community. Studies show women are just as aggressive as men, and they compete through relationships using something my friend Kurt Doolittle refers to as GSR.
Always gotta love it when you quote your friends. I'm gonna quote my friend in this video. It's not published anywhere, but definitely quotable. Okay, so I wanted to make one other point, which had to do with the empirics. This idea that women can't lead because because 1,000 years ago women didn't form a church. That's what it sounded like. The argument was to me, like, women have no track record on forming large groups, except for, of course, the entire movement for women's legal autonomy and the right to vote. Women's activism around reproductive rights, around getting their own bank accounts. You know, we see women organizing actually meaningfully quite a lot. So organizing large groups just it doesn't really make sense to me as a complaint. And also the idea that, what was it, like military groups were created by men because of biology, because women don't cooperate. Again, just not the case. And in terms of the empirics, we know women can lead and have led. So this is just lists of female governors in the United States. Apparently, we've had 49 women who have or are serving as the governors. And while the initial women sort of like were more symbolic representation, the first woman to be acting governor did it because her the governor attended someone died and filled the position, whatever else, a special election, the widow was elected. But by the 1970s, during first wave feminism, it was predominantly performative and symbolic representation rather than substantive representation. But by the 1970s, we started to get, women being elected as governors was becoming more common. And at the moment, as of January 10th, 2023, 18 states have never had a female governor. But that means that 32 have. So 3 women of color have been state governors. Martinez and Haley were both Republicans, while Grisham was a Democrat. Let's see. There was also what else has gone here? So, and here's the thing: is that when women are governors, states don't fall apart. There are currently 12 women running states right now, and I think like most of them are Republican. Let's see. I'm trying to check here, but I can't see the numbers off very easily. So I'm just going to say that it's not the case that women can't be executives. Women run companies. Women run lots of things. And they do fine. I mean, they're not doing any more poorly than men, that's for sure. And so these claims are just, when you try to unpack them and look at the reality and the data, it just doesn't seem to match up very well. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to use this as an example of how patriarchal attitudes and values and beliefs really are about protecting people because of identity politics. It's really saying that, we don't want a competition. We don't believe in meritocracy. We don't think you should be judged on the content of your character. Rather, your existence in my space of power is a threat to me. Therefore, I have to find reasons to keep you out. And reasons are just biases and bigotries. And that's not a good enough reason to deny a talented person a chance to share their talents with the world. And that's what I wanted to say about that. I want to apologize again for my technical errors. I'm still getting into the swing of doing these live streams again. It has been a while. And did I just shut down everything? Hold on a second. I was just talking about how difficult it was. One quick second. So I saw that there were comments in the chat. And yeah, I'm going to quickly grab some stuff. I'm going to kick you over to the pre-show while I pull up the chat for Q&A. So this is the end of the regular stuff. See me in 1 minute for the Q&A. And I'm back. Hello, all. I accidentally closed the entire YouTube tab out, and so the channel just went bye-bye, and I had to go get it out. So let's pop out the chat and just say hi to the people who who stopped by and said something, which I very much appreciate. All right. So I can't really show it to you this time. I'll set it up for the next time, but let me read it out. Okay. Hello, dear lady. Hey, Flint. So Space Karen is not going to save us after all. No. Let's see. Boudica. Yeah, Flint. I seem to remember Boudica was pretty good at organizing a large group. Well put. Well put, my friend. Faye Queen Corey, hello, thank you for stopping by. He seems to not know of any of the many matriarchies that existed around the world, but he means the world, aka only white people. Yeah, there's a lot of white centrism in his videos. For instance, he said something about like blah, 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 an empire falls and then 400 years someone finds a scroll to restart the age of like the Renaissance. I'm like, okay, you know that there was other history besides like Western history, and the Renaissance was only made possible because of the great translation work done in the Arabic world, translating Greek into Arabic in order to preserve a lot of those texts. So current Western knowledge, it could not exist without the work of Arabic translators in the sort of the Dark Ages. Okay. So there's an Egyptian queen, I can't even say it. I'm going to say an Egyptian queen who ruled. Yes, obviously, another example. What I could think of just in terms of the history of the English language, the two most famous eras in British/English history are the Elizabethan era and the Victorian era. And yeah, Queen Mary was killed a lot of Catholics. Not Catholic, a lot of Protestants. Bloody Queen Mary, she was quite divisive. Mary, Queen of Scots, also not the best leader, although Scottish politics is like level 10 challenge anyway, whereas Elizabeth had a really unified court who were interested in protecting her power as a Protestant state against the Catholic juggernaut. So she had a huge benefit from having loyal advisors, whereas Mary, Queen of Scots, was really dealing with a lot of factionalism and trying to balance sides, and that was always difficult. The best time to ask any Scottish person from that time period. But yeah, there's a ton of examples that we can look at. Let's see. Biological essentialism is also fundamentally rooted in Eurocentrism, Faye Queen Corey notes correctly. But then so is alt history. Even some of the European societies had women in traditionally male societal roles. Yeah, what I seem to see looking back throughout history is that there were some cultures where Western cultures, right? I don't know much. I'm going to limit it to Western, and I'm going to admit that I am ignorant about a whole bunch of stuff, except for very vaguely, and that's a big blind spot I hope to work on in the next couple of years over the course of this series. But in the Western sense, there are examples of women who are able to, for instance, like a widow being able to inherit property and, of course, keep her dowry until she died herself, and then it usually went to her eldest male child. So it seems like women's rights were always navigated within what was convenient for men at the time. So we do have examples of women who are running their own breweries in the Middle Ages and being entrepreneurs who were not only like doing stuff around the house, but they were, boiling up brine to make salt for sale and doing beer and all kinds of things, selling beer, being really industrious little entrepreneurs. And their biggest barriers were the extent to which the men in their family or society allowed them those rights. So it was not so much about women's inability, it was external constraints. And we see that when external constraints are removed, girls and women thrive. In the United States right now, everyone's talking about the problem about boys because girls, again, in the aggregate, just as we're going to talk about so I'm not quite sure where non-binary people would fall into this, but girls are more likely to finish high school. Young women are more likely to go to college, and young women are more likely to graduate college than their male peers. So clearly, it's not a biological thing. In fact, without women, we wouldn't realize how failing boys were in our society. And maybe boys have always been failing in that way, but it wasn't until contrasted with women being in education and competing with them for university places and then getting degrees and competing with them in the job market. Again, very much a Western American focused take here. But yeah, there's nothing biological about women's, I don't think it's biological that women are succeeding. I think there are socialization factors here that are important to look at. And that's why I want to do this take. So let's say women didn't hunt, yet there are tons of non-women hunters and warriors throughout history. Yeah, again, these are just appeals to stereotype. Fake Queen Corey. Let's see. And my tech. Yeah, thank you for being patient with my tech. Yes, it diminishes us all when any part of our society is oppressed. Exactly. I don't understand. Like, think about how many Madame Curies or Florence Nightingales or other really impressive women throughout history were never given an opportunity simply because they, peed sitting down. They didn't have some kind of special magic wand to wave around. So it's just the waste of the amount of talent wasted, solutions that we could have had earlier, all kinds of it's just such a massive waste. And in my opinion, to have true equality in a society, you need, basic human respect for other people and tolerance, and then also providing people with opportunities to succeed and be their best selves. And systems of oppression that deny people those opportunities of success are mostly hurting that individual, but a knock-on effect is that all of society is being deprived of their talents. And that is just stupid. Okay, well, see, mission creep. I was saying 15 to 20 and it went long, but this is only the bit after. So I will go ahead and wrap it up, but it's been great to see all of you. Saturdays are working out for me better. My Sundays are getting kind of busy, so I think I'm going to switch to a Saturday show from now on. And just as an FYI, before I wrap it up, I am going to be able to do, I think, about 3 more shows, and then I'm going to the States for a wedding for 2 weeks. So you get a couple more. Also, I do have a dusty old Discord about how patriarchy ruins everything. You know what I should do? I should go ahead and put that in the video description. So I'll be looking to do that as well. And if you want to join the community and just complain about patriarchy, you too can join. So until next time, thank you to Flint. Thank you for Fake Queen Corey for stopping by. Who else did I see? Yeah, Ga5524. I appreciate your time. And big hugs to you all. I've been Kristi. You've been awesome. And we'll see each other again really soon.